morning, Rachel.
Good
How are
morning,
you
Germaine.
from
Nice to
down
see
under?
you. Very, very well. Nice and cold.
Oh my God, it's so good to see you. So, welcome everybody to Everyday Conversation with Everyday People. I have with me the very beautiful Rachael Tan, who is a woman, sorry, of so many talents. It's really amazing. Let me just go through your series of talents, okay? So
You're too kind, Germaine.
Rachel is a registered clinical psychologist, and her work centers around family and children. So she's very passionate with that, particularly children with special needs. Yes? And Rachel, you grew up in Singapore. You left
I
us and
did.
went
I
to
did.
Australia.
Well, I'm not sure if
Oh,
left was the word, more like maybe sent to Australia back in the day. But yes, I did grow up in Australia, in Singapore, and I probably spent slightly more than half my life in Australia now. I think last
really?
year it ticked over, finally. So yeah, but Singapore is still always home. So
I know, right? But I love Australia, and just make sure that I have a friend to visit next time I'm there.
yeah,
And
anytime, Germaine. Welcome anytime.
I know, right? And not only is Rachel those two things that I've just mentioned, she contributes to article and she is an author. Oh my goodness. Rachel, I have your book. I love this book. Of course, it's the other way around. But to people who are watching us, this book is Help. I'm a Parent. If you're a parent, you need to get your hand on this book, okay? So actually, Rachel, today, thanks for joining me on my virtual sofa.
Thank you for having me.
Couple of questions, that I want to ask on behalf of all the parents out there. Of late we had coronavirus, and it is really very challenging time for all of us. All of a sudden, the world has to pivot. And by the way, pivot is series 2 key theme. And today we are talking to Rachel about transiting. So what do we mean by transiting in the new normal? We mean that you have to do things that you never once had to worry before. So I'm going to kick off by asking you something that is related to home-based learning and working from home. Clearly, both are hitting people who have young children at home and who themselves are a parent, right? So home-based learning now is pretty much the new normal of kids of all ages. Even though they are beginning to go back to school, a large part of it is still home-based learning. And at the same time, parents, are asked not to come back to the office if there is at all a possibility that they can work from home. Right. So my first question to you, Rach, is that how, okay, can you tell the parents how can they keep a child effectively occupied while still be able to work from home?
So I guess, one of the main issues that has been coming up, I think, from both, my friends who are parents as well as clients who are parents, one thing that's been quite difficult is, I guess holding a lot of the Zoom type meetings from home, because obviously everybody's communicating now, with technology. And so, when parents need that uninterrupted time, it can be quite difficult, I think, for lots of parents, especially with the little ones, if they don't have extra help at home. So I guess, the principle that we always want to remember is that we want to be proactive rather than reactive. And what that means is really setting yourself up and your child for success. So that means doing the right thing rather than waiting for them to do the wrong thing and then, having to tell them off or having to punish them for it. Because by then they've already done the behavior, and, that we don't want to have to deal with that. We're better off setting things up so that they work really well. And then we can, all have our, enjoyment time, I guess. So mum and dad can do their work, and the child can be happily occupied. So yeah, thinking about being proactive in a situation like this. So if you need uninterrupted time, I think something that's quite common that everyone knows about is who, what, where, when and why. So in this case, we can kind of apply that as well, but we want to start with the why first. So if your child is, over about 3.5 years old and they have a basic but good understanding of language, you want to tell them, information about why. So why you need to have this time without them, and why you need them to be by themselves at the time. And then you want to tell them what you want them to do. So what should they be doing exactly? And then you want to tell them where you'd like them to stay. So if they are to be in the same room, you might say, okay, mummy needs you to stay on the floor in the corner. If you're needing to go in a separate room, you might say, okay, mummy's going to go in this other room, but I need to stay, in the living room on the mat. So giving them information about where you want them to be. So we've done why, what, where, and then when. So you want to tell them for how long you're going to be. That can be a little bit tricky, but I think for most meetings, there's usually a duration for the meetings, right? Meetings don't tend to go on forever. So you want to tell your child when, how long you're going to be away for. So how long they need to keep themselves occupied for as well. I like to use a timer if you've got little kids that don't really understand the numbers counting down. Using a visual timer. If you go on your phone's app store and you just type visual timer, there's plenty of them, free ones you can buy, but anyone will do, just to help their understanding of, because a small child might not understand what half an hour looks like, but on the visual timer, rather than using numbers, it actually uses colors. So the color of, the pie, starts running out slowly, and then they can see that, okay, mummy's going to be this long, rather than, 29 minutes and 57 seconds means absolutely nothing, to a small child. And then one of my other tricks as well is, keeping really motivating activities for times like this. So when you have to go away and be away from your child and you need them to occupy themselves, you keep this really, really motivating activity only for those times, which means that they're more likely to want to be engaged at that time with that item because they only get it at certain times. So that motivation to actually stay with it is high, which means that you're more likely to be undisturbed during that time because they're occupied and happy.
Oh, wow. We already learned a couple of tricks.
I hope that is helpful.
I knew that, if you literally set a timer in front of them, that is so cool, because that just makes perfect sense, isn't it? Okay, so that leads me into a second question. Very sneaky. I might put you on the spot, I'm sure a lot of parents are grappling with the fact that, oh my goodness, this home-based learning is all new. Here I am having to deal with work from home. It's already new. And then I have to watch my kids.
I know.
And some of these kids, they're telling you, okay, I'm quite smart. I don't need this home-based learning. I'm just going to be well, and I think it's a very challenging thing to do. So question to you, Rachel, is how do we help our parents to cope, with home-based learning? What are the tips that we can give to parents, to at least help them to get their kids motivated to do the home-based learning?
So I guess, with any new behavior, whether it's for children or for adults, starting a new behavior and a new habit is hard. And that's just human nature. And I think sometimes as parents, we forget that, because adults tend to be a little bit more self-motivated or can see, the reward in things that maybe are a little bit more abstract. So for example, if I work really hard for, 12 months, I might get a promotion, in 18 months, for example. But for children, it's very hard for them to see abstract concepts like that. And, I guess the reward that doesn't come straight away. So I think using those principles, what we want to do is to kickstart any new habit, we need to have motivation. And so what I like to do is incorporate rewards into teaching a lot. So home-based learning obviously is quite a new concept for a lot of our kids. Right. Home used to be play and relax, and then school used to be that's where I go to work, and kind of the same for us as well. So we've all had to really adjust to a new way of doing things. So when we're looking at rewards and motivating new behavior, we want to make sure really two things. The first one is that the reward is meaningful for the person. So if something is not meaningful, then it's not really motivating and it's not really going to work as a reward. Even though we think, so for example, we think, oh, my child might really like this chocolate, but it may be that child actually doesn't really like chocolate, which means that it's not going to be motivating at all. And then we wonder, oh, but how come they're not doing, the homework because I said they could have chocolate, but actually that child doesn't like chocolate. So we have to really make sure that the reward is meaningful to whoever it is that we're trying to encourage the new behavior from. And then the other one that we need to make sure as well is that it is feasible. Yeah. So feasible for the parents to actually be giving as a reward. So not really much point if, the reward that the child, is wanting is a trip to Disneyland every time we do our homework. That's clearly not feasible, and no, that's not what you're going to get. But, that can still give us ideas about what things are reinforcing for that child. So what is it about Disneyland? And we can kind of have a conversation about that and see what kind of factors of Disneyland are things that maybe we can do. So for example, it might be like, okay, if you've done this behavior that we want you to do, so you've done your homework really nicely and really well for, X number of times, maybe we go to Universal Studios instead. So obviously it wouldn't be something like if you were using things like food items, you might do it every day. So every time you do your homework, you get a little piece of chocolate. If the reward is Universal Studios, then you'd want to be having it for maybe after 10 times or after 20 times of doing that behavior, because otherwise, it's not feasible for the parent, even though it is meaningful for the child. So it has to be both of those things for a reward to work effectively.
That is so great. I mean, Rachel.
Yeah, good.
One thing about these conversations is that we try to keep it quite succinct and short. And already within a short time, we're learning so much from you.
That's good. Thank you, Germaine. That's good to hear.
I know, right? Okay, so to round it all up, there's this other very pressing questions that, before our conversation, I actually took a quick poll amongst the parents who are in my group. And they're like, can you ask Rachel, how do we not get into each other's hair? Because, we are all at home as a family, we do not have something like that. So now we're all in each other's space, and so it can get very challenging, So how do you think that we can effectively kind of like, teach the parents to have some me space, the child have your me space, and let's keep out each other's way?
That is a fantastic question, and I think one that many parents, I think even before, COVID, struggle with. So I work with a lot of parents with either younger children or multiple siblings, and also parents who have children with special needs. So sometimes keeping them occupied, even on a weekend when there was no coronavirus or anything like that, can be very, very tricky. Obviously in Australia we have winter, so it does rain a lot, and obviously for you guys in Singapore it rains a lot as well. The key to this one is routine. So what that means is, rather than kind of letting things, just kind of happen during the day. And again, that coming back to that being proactive rather than reactive type principle, we really want to try and schedule the day so that our children know what's coming up next. And also it really helps parents know what they need to prepare for next as well. So everyone's not just sitting there going, oh, we don't know what to do. And, the kids are running around, jumping off the walls and things like that. Everyone's yelling at each other. So the easiest way I find to do this, to start with, if you've never had planned a routine at home, is to plan the day around meal times, right? Because those are kind of really easy. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I see.
Some of our families do morning tea and afternoon tea as well. So there's kind of either 3 or 5 checkpoints during the day, and it just divides up the day into a logical and what's going to be a more manageable, I guess, chunk or period, right? And then what you can then do, so for example, if we normally have lunch at 1 o'clock and then maybe dinner is at 6, so you've got 5 hours between lunch and dinner, right? What then I like to do is break up the day into maybe half an hour blocks. That's usually manageable for most parents. So 5 hours, half an hour, so that means you've got 10 blocks in that time period. And then what you can do is, engage your children in, if they're old enough, into planning what they'd like to fit into those half an hour blocks. And what you want to do is also make sure that there's variety in that day. So it's not 6 blocks of those, 3.5 hours of TV time. because that's not particularly constructive. So you might want to choose between, so the first half an hour is an independent activity where your children, do Lego or arts and crafts by themselves. And then the next half an hour is something that you do together with them. So you're both getting, alone time, but your children are also getting your attention periodically so that they don't, play up because they're bored or they're wanting mummy's attention or daddy to do something with them because they know it's going to come next because it's on the schedule and they can see that. And again, with those half an hour blocks, you can use that, the concept of using the timer as well. So they know how long more they have to sit there and do X activity before actually now daddy's going to come and do Y activity with them. And you kind of want to mix up also, physical activities versus sedentary activities. So it might be, that first block is might be after lunch. So it might be the arts and crafts one. And then the next one might be an obstacle course, and then the next one might be, reading time. And then the next one might be, we do something, outside in the corridor, for example, running up and down and things like that. So trying to mix it up throughout the day. And getting the kids involved in, coming up with those ideas of what they can do as well to occupy themselves. And I think something that's really quite important as well now, because, most people are spending a lot of time at home. I know the situation is getting better in, certain areas, like in Singapore, in Perth as well. But lots of people are still choosing, to stay at home just because the virus is still out there. I think something to remember is, just remember to cut each other some slack as well. So, parents, we all want to do the best that we can. We want to make sure our kids are always learning, always doing something constructive. But, there's absolutely nothing wrong if that child has done what they need to be, doing for the day already. So they've done their homework, they've done their chores, they've done the schedule, and, they want chill time. And I think we have to remember that as adults, we also have chill time, for example. So at the end of the day, when we come home from work, some parents like to have a glass of wine. Some people like to watch Netflix. Some people like to watch, I think Korean dramas on their phone and things like that. So, making sure that we afford our kids those privileges as well once they've done the things that we need them to do, which is why that routine and that schedule can be so important. So then, they know and that they've done everything that they're supposed to be doing. And now actually, yes, you can spend the next, 1 hour on your iPad or watching TV and just, having relaxed time for the rest of the day.
Okay, so Rachel, thank you so much. On that note, we're pretty much out of time. So let me address the audience who's listening into this. If you feel that you have learned a lot and you want to connect with Rachel, we are actually organizing a masterclass coming up, with Rachel. So do please write to us at www.elpishideout.com. And also, for those people who want to avail themselves to this book, write to us as well. And we will make sure that you have a copy. So Rachel, on that note, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Germaine, for having me. That time went very quick. It was an absolute pleasure. And I hope this conversation was, helpful and will be helpful to lots and lots of parents out there.
Yes, it certainly has been. So thank you so much and stay safe, Rachel.
You're welcome. You too, Germaine. See you. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.